How do you do?
I'm Edith Van Hopper. It's so nice to run into you here, just when I was beginning to despair of finding any old friends here in Monte. But do sit down and have some coffee. Mr. DeWitter's having some coffee with me. Go and ask the stupid waiter for another cup.
If you love listening to this show, please consider giving a rating and a review on Amazon Alexa or wherever you listen. We want to continue bringing you this amazing content, and part of our ability to do that means that we need a big audience. Now, it may not seem like much, but rating and reviewing the show will help more people find us, just like how you found this show. Simply on any podcast platform, search for a show, scroll down to the bottom, and push 5 stars. It's that easy. Thanks for supporting the show. So today I'm joined by Dr. Chao, who is the CEO and founder of Seatrec, a company working to monitor and understand and ultimately protect the ocean and its health. Welcome to the show today.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. So you spent almost a couple of decades at NASA's JPL studying the ocean and developing a technology to harvest clean energy from the ocean's temperature and differences. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more in terms of how that experience has played a critical role as it pertains to the current position that you have at Seatrec.
Yeah, after my Ph.D. in oceanography, I spent 20 years working at NASA Jet Propulsion Lab, launching satellites to study ocean from space. After launching a few satellites, I realized satellite can only see the surface of the ocean. There's three-dimensional ocean to be discovered below the sea surface. So I've been reaching out to a number of different investigators working on underwater robotic to access the deep ocean. And in the process, I realized most of these robots have this single biggest bottleneck to power them. So I do some digging and realized this concept to harvest energy in situ underway from ocean thermal energy. So I spent a few years and developed the prototype. And then ready to be commercialized, I left JPL, started Seatrec.
Amazing. And of course, we're going to explore a little bit more, but what's interesting is the initial kind of application is very specific. So just for those that are listening, again, I don't think this solution is necessarily going to be the wind or solar replacement, but rather something very specific to smaller use cases like this. So if you could tell us a little bit more about Seatrec and how it's actually allowing to create these unlimited clean energy via these aquatic robots, and specifically using the phase change materials approach.
Right. We harvest energy from the ocean temperature difference. So ocean is warm at the surface and cold at depths. So essentially, we convert this temperature difference into electricity. We use phase change materials to convert temperature difference into a thermal expansion by going through solid to liquid materials. This is mechanical expansion, the mechanical energy, and then is converted to electricity. They can be stored for future use, to increase emission life, power more sensors, and as a renewable source is being sustainable to the environment.
And I think what's quite exciting is in the case of, let's say, submarines and types of research instrumentation that it has to go under the water, is that you're effectively allowing for, like I said, in situ, allowing for these machineries to also be able to develop their own set of energy as well, harvest it. If you go into a little bit more detail around these robots that you guys are designing and how they're designed with wax that changes the phase depending on the temperature, like you're referring to, and just get into a little bit more of the science behind it.
Yeah, ocean is big because there's a huge demand to collect data everywhere, particularly in a remote area of the ocean. So the thousands of robots we're using today are permanently powered by batteries. When the batteries runs out, you either deploy a new one, let the instrument disappear in the ocean, or you retrieve them from the vessel, surface vessel. So changing the battery, recharge them on the deck of the ship. So either way is difficult to do in the remote areas. So we developed this wax-like materials can be carried on these robots as they swim in the ocean. Every time they experience temperature difference between cold and warm temperature, we convert that electricity, we charge the battery, we can continue to allow them to have a long life mission to collect data essentially indefinitely.
So just to be very clear, is that instead of having to rely on just the robots that you guys are developing, that you can actually outfit the existing types of instrumentation and robots that are being used with this type of phase material approach so that it can actually be self-sufficient from an energy source. Is that correct?
Right. For disposable robots, we work with the manufacturer to attach our system before we deploy in the ocean. For some reusable platforms, we can work with the operators. We can retrofit the existing fleet of robots to attach our system to their robots and then to gather electricity from the environment so can enhance their mission.
Amazing. Now, just to be clear, just to give a little bit of quantification, can you talk about what's the kind of level of energy that it's producing? Because from what we read, it appears that maybe it's enough to charge half the energy of a single a AA alkaline battery. Can you give us a little bit more sense? And then what does that mean in terms of what it can do? And then how long would it take to recharge before it can be used again?
Yeah, it's a scalable technology. So it depends on the sensors. The customer will come to us, tell us the energy consumption for their sensors and the robots. And then we essentially scale the energy demand with the appropriate amount of phase change materials, these wax materials, and then it can be a few kilograms, could be tens of kilograms. Some of the customer we attach hundreds of kilograms, depends on the size allowance of our system. So essentially, we design our energy harvesting to hopefully to meet 100% of their energy demand so they can continue to operate in the ocean until something else fails. So we essentially remove the energy as the bottleneck of the limitation.
Now, in cases where their energy requirement is greater than a few hundred, few thousand, how do you use something like a daisy chain approach to stitch smaller sets of robots to create more energy harvesting?
Yeah, for basically the smaller energy demands, where we deliver a portable system like a backpack to attach to the robot itself. For some larger energy consumption system, like a propeller-driven vehicles, like those autonomous underwater vehicles, require kilowatt hours every day, every week. So in that case, we are separating our energy harvesting system from the robot itself. So essentially, we hope to deploy our charging station underwater. So these robots can continue to do their mission. By the end of the mission, when the battery runs out, they can come back to the charging station, essentially purchasing a kilowatt hours or 10 kilowatt hours from us, and then continue to do their mission without calling expensive ship operation at the surface.
So this is a really interesting model because I think on land, this is the closest resemblance of this would be electrification of cars, fleets, and of course the charging stations. But here we're talking about underwater, essentially recharging stations across ocean floors or floating, let's say. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the kinds of application. We've been talking about maritime, but also research, but there's also military context as well, right? And I think especially given some of the activities in the South Pacific as well as activities in the Arctic, being able to actually have these robots for even civilians becomes hypercritical.
You may also like our quarterly Ask Joe Perkins event that brings some of the most notable experts and category-leading startups in their area of sustainability and human survival on Earth and in space. To register, visit astroperkins.com/events.
Yes, there's certainly the technology was originally funded by the DoD, the Navy Office of Naval Research, from the Basic Research Division. We kind of graduated from there, and then now we have a commercial product. We hope to power many of the naval sensors, naval monitoring system, collecting environmental data, doing surveillance operation, and then we can scale up to more powerful platforms. And then we are developing the charging station prototype for the Navy, and hopefully to increase of energy production, and so we can meet more and more power demand from the robotic point of view.
And you guys have also been recognized by a number of organizations, including the DoD, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, have been the recipient of the Powering the Blue Economy Award. Can you tell us a little bit more about what it means to actually be recognized for this science, and why it's important, given the fact that, when we think about harvesting clean energy, we're generally thinking about large scale, but here, again, it's more of a niche play, right?
Right. That's prize is specifically jointly sponsored by DoD, DOE, and NOAA, focus on blue economy, ocean observing. So we submit our first product to the competition. We are among the dozen prize winners. We are very proud to be recognized as a commercial system spin-off from academic research, and then to be able to power those thousands of sensors, so we can dramatically reduce the cost of data collection underwater. Most of these battery-powered device is too expensive to recover. In many cases, they just abandon in the ocean. So with our system, so we can essentially make their life 10 times or even longer. So in that case, we can reduce the data collection costs at least by order of magnitude, if not more.
Absolutely. Now, you've been studying the ocean. Again, I know you have a Ph.D. from MIT as well, for many, many decades, and I'm sure you're very familiar with power turbines that's harvesting the movements of the ocean waves to different technologies that's being employed for collecting plastics and other types of refuse, for example. I wonder, as we grow our footprint around both the energy harvesting, but also specifically the ocean conservation, how some of this technology that you're working on specifically would be very helpful. So, for example, I know that one rather large experiment that's looking to essentially contain and collect quite a bit of plastic that kind of merges around this one particular section of the ocean, for instance.
Yeah, we're offering a fairly complementary source of renewable energy. Many of this energy sources, as you mentioned, solar, wind, and wave, or a turbine underwater, they are primarily at either the surface or have a large footprint and are very expensive to install. And many of these sensors, particularly we are talking about this distributed sensor network, need to have much smaller, cost-effective source of energy. So we kind of fill that gap, provide very relatively small, cost-effective system, so they can be carried by the robots, can be distributed, a charging station, a network of these. So essentially, we reduce the power energy price by almost order of magnitude compared to many of the other expensive sources of energy underwater.
Now, again, I don't think we are in a position to list all the exhaustive, use cases of, this type of technology. But one of the things that's quite interesting to me is a few years ago, the weather weather company sold some of its data and some of the hardware capabilities to IBM, for example. So when we think about on the ground, there's a lot of sensors that is, taking everything from atmospheric to wind and even pollen count and so forth. So we know a lot of things about what's happening on the ground level, and certainly we have satellite imagery as well. But at the ocean level, I feel like it's somewhat kind of blind. We're kind of running in blind in the sense that certainly where the robots are deployed, you have some visibility, but for the most part, we don't really know much about what's happening in that 2/3 of the space that covers the Earth, right? And I wonder, as we have more robots and sensors that are enabled, what does that mean, and how does that help protect both from a conservation perspective, but also from a security point of view?
Don't forget to visit astroperkins.com to register for our next quarterly events. Past and current speakers include Julianne Hough, actress, dancer, and winner of Dancing with the Stars, Damian Vaughn, former NFL player, Neil Gregory, Chief Thought Leadership Officer at the IFC World Bank, and many more. To register, visit astroperkins.com and click on Events.
That's a great question. We need to know so much about the ocean. We know very little about today. We need to know the map of the seafloor, for example. As you know, we know more about the surface of the moon and Mars. We can land on Mars precisely at certain location with a certain slope of the bathymetry. So we know the surface of Mars down to meters. And then 80%, more than 80% of the seafloor never been mapped by in situ sensors. Primarily will monitor from space. So our pixel size of the seafloor is on the order of thousands of meters. So that would be one example. We hope to deploy this thousands of robots to carry power-hungry sensors using acoustic to map the seafloor. That's just the one simplest project ideas we can push forwards to enabled by our technology. We can monitor ocean temperature to see how much heat we stored when the hurricane passed by, so we can quantify the fuel to intensify the hurricanes. We have very poor skill to predict the intensification of the hurricane. So if we can collect more data below the sea surface, so we can tell how much heat available to fuel the hurricane. That's another incredibly important societal problem. If we know more about the ocean environment, about the chemistry, the biology, we can protect the coral reef, the ecosystem from conservation point of view. When we move to fishery offshore, so we need to monitor being a sustainable operation. So there's a number of different emerging industry under the blue economy need to have more knowledge of the ocean, need to monitor ocean on a 24/7, 365 on the continuous basis, so we can make better decision based on the data and the information.
Love that. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. You had mentioned, again, the development of the charging data relay stations for autonomous underwater vehicles and robots. Can you share a little bit about kind of that product roadmap for the next, let's say, 6 months to maybe a year plus, in terms of what are some of the key things that you guys are working towards?
Yeah, this is a very exciting time. We just finished a 3-year project funded by the Navy to develop the laboratory prototype. So essentially, we have a laboratory charging station. We can harvest energy from the temperature difference in our tank in the laboratory. So hopefully in the next 6 to 12 months, we're going to take that laboratory prototype to ocean environments. We can mature the product, and probably in 2 years' time, we should be ready to take order to install the first charging station underwater, so we can become an energy as a service to sell electricity.
Wonderful. Energy as a service. I love that in the ocean. The last question for you that we generally always ask for startups is lessons learned. So any type of product or project failure, maybe it's related to this or prior, they can share with others in terms of insights gained.
Let me think about it. Project failures. Well, as a startup, we try many things, right? So we want to fail fast so we can speed up the prototyping process. The most recent experience, we had a project funded by DARPA. We proposed extremely high risk ideas, and then at the beginning, everybody is extremely excited. We get funded pretty quickly by DARPA sponsors, and everybody very excited stay behind the technology. After about 9 months or so, we realized this technology is way too early, premature. So we probably require at least twice the money and maybe 3 times more time to complete the project. So we have to stop the project, return the money, and then go back to the drawing board and then think about how do we improve, mitigate the risk and reduce the risk and mature the technology. So things like that, we want to fail fast so we can start improve our technology.
I think that's a fantastic example. And with that, I've been joined by Dr. Chao. who is the CEO of Seatrec. Thank you for joining today.
Thank you so much.
If you've enjoyed this episode, take a moment to rate our show on any podcast platform that you listen to. Scroll down to the bottom and push 5 stars. It's that easy. And as always, thanks for listening.